you want to go first, Andrew?
Co-chairs, members of the committee, Andrea Mai, legislative director of the...
And Andrea,
Yep.
I know originally I said we were going to go just till 10. Let's just go till 20 after.
Thank you. Legislative director of the ACLU of Oregon here in opposition. I'll testify and then move away so the other folks can come. And I just wanted to clarify a few things and make a few statements about the larger issues. I know there was talk about a work group, and I think there's two kinds of work groups in this building. And for purposes of this bill, ACLU, which helped draft the original law, was not part of the work group. As I said, we were involved in drafting the law, and the language was very carefully done. And I believe voters understood that the dynamics of medical marijuana was evolving with medical conditions because of the failure of our government to actually allow it to be prescribed. We are limited in that way. But there was a specific rationale of putting it with the Oregon Health Authority rather than the Board of Pharmacy or the state police. And that's one of the things that the Oregon Health Authority does is handles public health information carefully and confidentiality because they are able to get that. And when you start adding law enforcement into that authority more and more, I think we get very concerned that it begins to undermine the trust of folks giving information to the Oregon Health Authority. The current law has appropriate access, we think, for law enforcement. Briefly on the change with the therapeutic value language that's being amended in the -1s. Basically, the -1s define therapeutic value the same way the current law is already written about mitigate the symptoms or effects of the person's debilitating medical condition. But it changes the doctor saying it may mitigate to the doctor having to say it will mitigate. And I don't think that's possible for physicians to do. I don't think they can ever say a medication will mitigate for that particular patient. Imposing such a requirement in the context of medical marijuana would result in deterring doctors and making it very difficult and interfering with the patient. With all due respect, as I think we all know, law enforcement has always opposed the Oregon medical marijuana, and I think will continue to do so. And I think what we should need to work on is changing the federal government policy regarding the controlled substance scheduling of marijuana for purposes of use for medical purposes. Thank you.
Okay. You need to leave.
No, I'm happy to stay. I just have others.
Any questions of Andrea? Representative Freeman?
Thank you, and thank you, Chair. I think I heard you say this. You think the current medical marijuana program is what the voters intended and what you worked on when you helped put the law together?
Co-chairs, Representative Freeman, to be first of all clear, I didn't, ACLU did, I wasn't around then. Two, I was specifically referring to the issues around the types of use for medical conditions, because I think it's often talked about that the voter pamphlets it's for this limited cancer, this limited situation. And specifically, I think it is evolving. There's actually studies regarding veterans, and maybe someone I believe will be tested in post-traumatic stress disorder and the use of medical marijuana. I think it's an evolving issue. And I think voters understood that, but we can all disagree or agree on that and other things related to this. I want to let the other folks who are more involved in the very specifics of the operation of the program speak.
Okay, the ACLU helped start this thing. That was part of your testimony.
Oh,
and you kind of made it sound like it's working just the way you all intended it to. So if that's what you're saying, I just wanted to hear that.
Co-chairs, Representative Freeman, it's not worked the way they intend to. I can talk about how difficult it is for patients who don't know how to grow medical marijuana and find someone to provide the medical marijuana. But again, I think other folks will do it. ACLU has policies on drug reform. We'll leave that to another day for a larger discussion.
Thank you.
Let's see. Bob, do you want to go next then?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, just a moment. Jennifer, you want to close up with this panel, right?
That's fine.
Would you want? Okay, thanks. Okay, Bob.
Co-chair Olson, co-chair Hunt, and members of the committee, I always appreciate being able to participate in this kind of testimony.
The if you'd identify yourself, Bob. If you'd identify yourself.
Robert Wolf. I'm with the Oregon Marijuana Policy Initiative. We're a coalition of a dozen major patient and advocacy groups devoted to defending the medical marijuana program in this legislative session. This legislature could have taken strong steps to deal with real drug problems in our state. We could have gone after cartels that grow on public lands. We could have gone after gangs that import drugs and cook meth. We could have addressed trafficking and prescription drugs, and we did not. not. Instead, we chose to go after medical marijuana patients, sick people, poor people, disabled people, sometimes dying people. These are the people that pay fees, that fill out paperwork, that give you their address, that try hard to comply with a relatively complex regulatory system. I call this the low-hanging fruit syndrome. They can't get away. Why are we attacking them? It's not that there aren't problems with medical marijuana, but there are no legitimate studies, reports, or surveys to back up these anecdotes of abuse. I think what the officers and law enforcement officials are describing are problems with the black market. The black market is much bigger than the medical marijuana program, and I don't believe this bill addresses the black market problems whatsoever. In fact, I will tell you that the marijuana genie is out of the bottle in terms of the black market, and you guys, the legislature, doesn't have the resources, the political will, or the social mandate to even go after it in any significant way. And I think the result is we're picking on medical marijuana patients because they're easy to get to. This bill was crafted outside of the process of obtaining public input, particularly no input from the affected constituency. During the work group process, I offered expert testimony on any aspect of medical marijuana so that the legislators would be up to speed on all the information they needed. I was rebuffed. I offered a series of proposals to improve OMA on behalf of the patients, and those ideas were ignored. And what we ended up with is a bill that instead finds ways to limit patient access to the program, to punish law-abiding citizens already enrolled in the program, and that allows law enforcement greater leeway to use the database to conduct warrantless visits and to go on fishing expeditions without cause. I want to let you know that if you use this bill to kick people out of the program, you will not stop their use of medical marijuana at all. Instead, you will create criminals out of people who are currently law-abiding citizens. With about 40,000 patients in the system, it's actually underutilized. If you take everybody in Oregon that has a qualifying condition, AIDS, multiple sclerosis, arthritis, gout, glaucoma, and so on, there could be hundreds of thousands of people who could qualify for this program and who might find benefit from the therapeutic use of medical marijuana. The fact is, our side is failing miserably to inform patients in need about this effective, low-cost treatment option. That said, if you want some factual and documented abuse of the program, not just anecdotes and scary pictures, look no further than law enforcement incursions into the patient registry. This supposed confidential database actually is subject to a huge number of queries by law enforcement. According to information provided by the medical marijuana program staff, after a long delay and many prevarications, it showed that there were more than 51,000 queries to the database for a one-year period ending in September 2010. And that figure is only queries made through the database. There are also a huge number of queries made over the phone that are recorded manually by program staff and kept in 3-ring binders. We don't know how many there are. They won't count them for us, but it is tens of thousands. The theoretical high estimate of the total number of queries in the database during that one-year period could be as much as 100,000 queries on the database. I think this is outrageous. Law enforcement is only supposed to hit the database if necessary to verify cardholder status. Were there actually 100,000 investigations into criminal behavior involving marijuana last year? I don't buy it. The pattern of database access is not proportionate to population overall or to patient cardholder population in any county or geographical area. As a matter of fact, the county with the greatest degree of hits on the database without justification is Marion County. Josephine County's up there, though. These numbers prove a broad systematic abuse of the database access by some law enforcement agencies, primarily county sheriff organizations, and I believe it is a poor allocation of law enforcement resources and a clear abrogation of law enforcement responsibility to pursue real crimes. The result of all this sound and fury, 60 people were kicked out of the medical marijuana program in 2010 for violating the law. 60 after potentially 100,000 database hits. Members of the committee, this is a bill that would not be good for the citizens of Oregon. It gives them no benefit. It would only criminalize harmless medical marijuana users. It would give law enforcement tacit permission to continue and even expand their vigilante or non-lawful access of the medical marijuana database. And again, the anecdotes I heard describe the black market, and I don't believe that this bill would do anything to stop that black market. I urge you to table this bill and allow it to die. Thank you very much. Again, I really appreciate participating.
Okay, thank you. Jose, you want to, or Leland, which one of you want to go next?
I'm prepared. Thank you,
Okay.
Co-Chair Olson.
Yeah, if you want to move that a little bit closer to you,
Co-Chair,
that'd be great,
my name
Leland.
is Leland Burger. I'm a lawyer. I practice statewide, including both Yamhill and Josephine counties, representing patients and their providers. I've been practicing since 1983, and I focused my practice on this area for about the last 15 years. I helped draft the Medical Marijuana Act in '98, and although I opposed it in its final form, I assisted in the drafting of Senate Bill 1085 in 2005. I'm also, I think, the person responsible for estimating initially that there would be 500 patients, and what that was about is that there was the thing of it is, Medical Marijuana Act or not, people are going to use cannabis therapeutically because it is a non-toxic herbal remedy. That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about plutonium. We're not talking about some huge public risk substance. We're not talking about methamphetamine or cocaine or anything. We're talking about medical cannabis. Anyway, there was, before the Medical Marijuana Act, a dispensary in Portland called the Alternative Health Center. When the police raided it, there were 350 people that were a part of that group. I extrapolated that to suggest that in 1998 there would likely be 500 patients statewide. As my colleague Mr. Wolf explained, only a small percentage of those with the listed conditions. The estimate is around 9%. If everybody in Oregon who qualified for the Medical Marijuana Act registered under the Medical Marijuana Act, there'd be 400,000 or 500,000 patients instead of 40,000 patients. So actually the number is low. And I did, Co-Chair, also want to correct that the people in Montana didn't repeal the Medical Marijuana Act. There's some political dynamics in Montana that have to do with the Tea Party and a governor that they don't appreciate, and there was the legislature tried to repeal
Right,
it. That's really what happened. So, and Mr. Wolf mentioned about 60, because Representative, I can't remember who it was, asked about how many people were arrested and prosecuted. The last time that question was asked in a legislative session was in 2002, and in that year the number given was 12, or 4 a year over the first 4 years of the program. The reason why there was this laughter about, and you should see the plants that got away kind of laughter, is that last session or the session before, Sheriff Mike Winters from Jackson County, each time he talked about the plants in Jackson County, they got bigger, and it was like, you should have seen the plants that got away. And the fact is that there are lots of patients and growers who aren't able to cultivate at all. In my friend Rafael Caso's county, it's the climate is what the sign says when you go into Grants Pass, and it's true that that's some of the largest and best medical cannabis in the world is cultivated in southern Oregon. That's just a fact. But the problem isn't that there's a lot of marijuana. The problem is that there isn't a regulated supply system. And we, as a community, tried to resolve that in the polls last fall by putting forward a really well-drafted regulated supply system, which unfortunately only gathered 43% of the votes. I don't think it's that the people don't want there to be a regulated supply system. I think that, frankly, I think it's not possible to pass that by an initiative. I think that that's what the legislature needs to work on. But if the legislature is really going to work on that, then the problem that Mr. Wolf identified exists. You can't have a meeting and not invite us to talk about how to resolve these problems, because we've been working on them for a long time. You can't also, I think, decide because some cops are unhappy with how many patients there are that we got to make it impossible for anybody to get a card. And really, functionally, when you change it to might mitigate to will mitigate, that's what you're doing. No physician says, well, because I'll give you an example. I take every morning. I take a thyroid pill. It's a hormone replacement thing. That's what I take. My physician didn't say, here, Lee, we checked your blood test. You need this thyroid replacement pill because it will mitigate this problem. He said, well, we'll see what happens. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't work. If it's not working, maybe we'll increase the dose, maybe we'll try something else. Functionally, Co-Chair Olson and Co-Chair Hun and members of the committee, if you change it from might mitigate to will mitigate, no one will be able to get a card in Oregon. And that's just wrong. I won a case today in the Oregon Supreme Court involving concealed handgun licenses. One of the abuses of the law is that sheriffs have been denying concealed handgun licenses to patients because they were patients, notwithstanding the fact that the law required them to do that. Judge Shively in Medford, Judge Price in Hillsborough, the Oregon Court of Appeals, and today the Oregon Supreme Court each said that the law requires sheriffs to issue concealed handgun licenses and to stop doing that. And then in the same way there's already been the abuses that Mr. Wolf described. That's really the problem. I didn't see in the bill where it limits the number of persons a person can be a caregiver for. And I think the problem with the notion about just ascribing prior convictions as an exclusion is that there are lots of reasons people could get prior convictions. I mean, you've heard about these cases in Josephine County. I've had two with Mr. Casso. One involved a guy who had the legal number of plants, but some of the immature plants got too tall. And the other involved some people who were visiting who the police said told them that they were helping to trim, and they said they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that's not a good case to take to trial. So, I'm certain that there are these kinds of abuses, but I think what we need to do is look at it in the broader perspective, again, that Mr. Wolf describes. Nobody ever talks about how big a bite the Oregon Medical Marijuana Act takes out of the underground market. If there wasn't an Oregon Medical Marijuana Act, all of the medicine, all the medicinal cannabis that patients had and used would come from the underground market. Because we've legalized that for medical purposes, that's no longer a part of the underground market. If we want to end the excess medical marijuana that's produced from winding up in the underground market, then we need to create a licensed and regulated supply system. And I'd encourage you to do that instead. I had one last thing, if I could, really briefly. One case I lost had to do with out-of-state patients being able to register in the state. And as a consequence of losing that case, oddly enough, the law changed and we are able to. And the reason is that the Court of Appeals was concerned about whether the requirements for being able to apply for a card interfered with a constitutional right to travel, kind of like the way the Heart of Atlanta Motel didn't used to let African Americans stay there until the United States Supreme Court said they had to. It's unconscionable to deny out-of-state patients the right to travel in Oregon with their medicine, so long as they're within the limits of the Oregon Medical Marijuana Act. It's just wrong to allow the privilege to Oregonians and deny it to out-of-state patients. Currently, of the 16, actually this week now 17 states and the District of Columbia, this week Delaware allowed it, and Delaware statute includes post-traumatic stress syndrome. Montana and Rhode Island have reciprocity provisions. If you want to work on a reciprocity provision, I'm certainly willing to help with that. But please, just kill this bill. This is a bill that really shouldn't go anywhere, and that's the reason the other 20 haven't either. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jose?
My name is Jose Garza. I'm a veteran of the United States military. Again, as everybody else has said, thank you for the opportunity for me to come speak. A couple of points that I'd like to hit on. It sounds like people have hit the will provide medical treatment and stuff like that. To me, it sounds, again, ridiculous. To say that something absolutely will do something. As ex-military, I can't tell you if we launch a mortar round that it absolutely will hit its target. That's why we launched 5. Okay? I do want to, thank you guys for listening in on the other people who have come in and changing the whole 3-month thing to 6 month. 6 months still seems a little bit much, just from the fact of there are a lot of families out there who don't have medical coverage, who don't qualify for the Oregon Health Plan, and to be able to come up with the $300, $400, $500 each and every visit to go in front of a doctor, have them sign this and all of that, is a little unfair for those families, because that's an extra expense on the youth. I personally can't see, as a father, any family using their child as the mule, their sick child as a mule so they can have marijuana in their house. So to really make them check more, it just doesn't really seem fair to me. The rules for the lead system. On a personal basis, I must say that I do agree that in some instances, law enforcement needs a way to verify the guy that they just pulled over. He has an ounce sitting next to him. Is he on the program? We got to know for real. Okay, I understand that. But to continually hand them a list every 3-4 months, every quarter, greatly jeopardizes the safety of each and every individual that is on the program. I'm aware that there's a county in the state of Oregon, I can't tell you which one, that published where they believe all of the medical marijuana grows to be. Washington County. Anyway, apologize for that. I know that in my grow alone, I've never charged a patient for a thing. I'm in a position, a very unique position in our community, of being able to take on patients who can't afford their medications, who can't afford the equipment to go in. Now, I've got well over $10,000, $12,000 in mine. A lot of these people can't afford that, so they come to somebody like me and say, look, I need my meds. Can you grow them for me? Well, and again, to touch on something new, the grow amount for people from 4 cards to 2. Well, the 4 people that I have, one is myself, one is my soon-to-be wife, one is a very good friend of mine who she's on housing, she's on Section 8 and Oregon Health Plan. She can't afford $100, $200 an ounce, so here you go. And another one is another person down here in Salem who, again, is going to college and spending every dime she's got to go to that. So here's your meds. To limit it down would, yes, limit the amount of meds that could be grown in one location, but would also limit the ability for certain patients to acquire the medication they need. One of the gentlemen who was sitting up here referred to, you don't know if it's 6 plants, 60 plants, or 6,000. There's one very, very easy way to check that. Stand outside on the corner and feel if there's 60,000 plants worth of heat coming out of that house, because that takes an unimaginable amount of light. I'm running 10,000 watts. I've got under 100 plants, but just about there. 60,000 plants, 60 plants, you can really tell when the grows are out of place. Blah, 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 blah. The very poor grower creating 2 pounds per plant. I am considered a low-end to medium grower. I'm coming up on a harvest. It's the largest harvest I've had yet. I'm hoping for a pound. I'm going to cut down 18 plants. 18. Not one of them is even slightly close to a pound. These kind of numbers come from the people who will veg a plant and put it outside and grow it for a year. 1 year's plant, yes, can yield 15 pounds. But that's for an entire year of that one plant. The way I grow is a perpetual grow. So I'm lucky to get 2, 3, 4 ounces from each plant. And it still takes me 6 months from the beginning to the end to grow that plant. So 2 pounds per plant, I just wanted to clarify that. I would be in heaven if I could reach that. My patients could have what they need. The last point that I'd like to touch on is PTSD. I've touched on it before. I would sit here as a veteran, as a man, as a father, and I am absolutely begging you guys, at some point in time, can we please put PTSD on here? I have it. I got it real bad. Okay? I smoke my cannabis. I take it. I eat it. I take RSO. It's a Rick Simpson oil. I do my regimen. And again, as I said to you before,
Mhm.
I'm able to fit back into my community. With that Rick Simpson oil that I take, 1 gram in the morning and 1 gram at lunch, takes roughly 5 to 6 ounces of a complete plant to make 1 gram of usable Rick Simpson oil in its complete form. So 16 grams will net you 10 grams of medicine.
Okay.
So thank you for hearing me.
Okay, thanks, Jose.